Hello and welcome to the Sales Code Leadership Podcast with your host, Kevin Teeler, and my guest this week, Lauren Bailey. Lauren, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm going to give you a wave as well. That will show up on the audio-visual version of the Sales Code Leadership Podcast. Are you away from your home today? I mean, whereabouts are you?
I am. This is not my chosen background. I am in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is right on the border of Kentucky in the middle of the US, doing a sales kickoff summit with a fantastic company in the genetics industry.
Wow,
Yeah.
quite something.
So we went most of the day yesterday, and this is my crazy hotel room background.
And so have you done the kickoff? Did you do the keynote or something?
I did do. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So my company, Factor 8, likes to partner with companies long-term, right? We get that event-based training doesn't work. So I was here kicking off with everybody, and we got excited about it. And we went through some of the first module and did some great activities. And of course, happy hour is a necessary finish as well.
How many people were in the audience when you kicked off?
Yeah, this was a smaller group, probably about 40.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but such a good group. I just love working with young new salespeople and helping them fall in love with sales and stay in sales. Because I think too many of us wound up here by mistake. Was that your path, Kevin?
You've switched the routine on me, Lauren. This is my podcast. I can't believe you're doing that. Has happened to me before. Someone did switch me on the old routerini. Do you know what? I always ask people, and this will be the next question that you'll get. Is this the career you had in mind at 16? And the honest truth is, I was planning to be, well, my original career plan was I wanted to be an astronaut because I grew up watching the moon landings. I was very, very young, right? Most people would be amazed to hear I was as old enough to even watch it, but I grew up watching the moon landings. And at the same time as Star Trek, the original Star Trek came out. So I was fascinated by space travel, technology, change, exciting futures and everything. So I wanted to be an astronaut. Then when that didn't materialize, I was planning to be either the kind of UK president of IBM or Apple. But I always knew that my route to that, I would always be a sales guy. So I am one of those rare people who did not fall into sales. It was a very deliberate choice. And it's been a deliberate choice to stay there ever since. I sort of tried to get away a little bit when I became a Gallup strengths coach. And then I realized that the value I could add was helping people mainly to be better sales teams and leaders, and using that as one of the tools to be better at selling and leading sales teams.
And you brought it together. I love it. I like how, UK president of a global 100 company is the backup to astronaut. That's a fantastic.
Yeah, it's a good one, isn't it? It's a cracker. What about you though? What were you planning to do at 16?
Well, what I dreamed of doing and what I said out loud I wanted to do were different. At about 16, I had seen my first motivational speaker. Her name was Carol Harder. She worked with high school kids, and she just blew my drawers off. I mean, unbelievable. I thought that was fantastic. It kind of set me up down a different path and making choices about how I was thinking and how I was living. And I thought, oh, I want to be her when I grow up. I wanted to be a motivational speaker. But people don't like hearing that from 16-year-olds. I learned very quickly, right? I'm a babe in the woods saying,
not unless you're Greta Thunberg, maybe.
And so people sort of looked at me funny, and I quit telling them that was my dream. And so, I wanted to be an actress for a minute. I wanted to be a house cleaner because I thought that was fun. But motivational speaker was the big one. And then I swallowed that, and shouldn't have, but I did do. And then as I was getting into college, I went looking for international business. I took my first trip out of the US at 17 to the UK, and then followed by Mexico. And I just loved it. Flying back in to my little town after being in London just put everything into perspective for me, and it slotted in so perfectly. I thought, I need more of this. So I went out looking how to get into international travel and business, which I did do.
So Factor 8, that's the company, isn't it?
Correct. So I started Factor 8 15 years ago. So we'll tie this all together in a bow if you'll give me 30 seconds. So I graduated, started working in technology, running sales teams, then moved back and forth between sales leadership and enablement leadership, because frankly, I just couldn't get the new hires out of training like I wanted to. So I went and started training departments and then traveled the world teaching the very first digital sellers for IBM how to sell direct, and then did the same for SAP. So I was in charge of the global training strategy for SAP as my last corporate gig. Hated my boss, jumped out and started Factor 8. And that was 15 years ago. Then 5 years ago, started my second company called #Girls Club, which is on a mission to get more women into sales leadership positions. And what I do now mostly on a day-to-day is motivational speaking. So I get to talk with sales leaders with my Factor 8 hat on, and I get to talk to women's groups and, aspiring women leaders with my Girls Club hat on. And that's my very favorite thing to do.
Why is it called Factor 8 though, Lauren?
Oh, the 8 is representative. It's sort of the art and the science of selling, and how great leaders and great salespeople have to translate from one world to another, whether it's strategy into tactics as a leader, or whether it's customer situations into products to tie them together as a salesperson, right? It has to be fluid and it has to translate. So that's the factor of translation.
Lovely. Explain that very well.
It's not a great answer. Yeah, I try to avoid answering it, but I didn't want to be, I didn't want to be LB Consulting.
No.
And I knew that, right? I wanted to have a cool name that could live on and be bigger than me.
Yeah. Oh, LB Consulting could have worked. Could have worked, couldn't it?
Except, I found a fantastic successor. My new president's name is Ted Martin. So not quite an LB, but, we'll make it.
Well, super. It's a really, really good introduction to the business from your point of view. We're going to go on mainly on this call to focus on salespeople. What makes great salespeople? Which obviously you've got an enormous amount of experience about. But before we get to that point, I did want to ask you another one of my favorite questions, which is, do you work to live or live to work?
I live to work. Nope. I used to live to work. Now I work to live. That was a Freudian slip right there. Caught me. I think that I definitely did. I was a workaholic young, and you have to be when you start your own company. I remember back, my kids I'm an old parent, so it's pretty easy for me to remember. I was young in my new business when I had my two boys, and I was opening up a contract the other day that was literally on their birthday, on the day, like sent it, went to the hospital, had a kid, worked the next day. And that, which is just insane looking back now, right? I was so eager to achieve and to prove that I did everything fast. I went through university with 2 majors, a student exchange program, and working full time, and did it in 3.5 years. Like I just couldn't wait to get out into the workforce. And then I couldn't wait to get ahead. And then I couldn't wait to start my own company. And I couldn't wait to be, a big deal. And I think that somewhere probably around 40, I figured it out to slow that down and switch it up.
Yeah, when we talk about this, we often talk about work-life balance, don't we? But I think the new thing, if you like, is work-life integration.
Yeah.
Because if one of your sons was ill, or if you got a phone call now from one of your sons to say, I'm not well or something, right? You'd drop everything, wouldn't you? And you'd rush out the room. And I would fully understand that, because we'd all fully understand that, wouldn't we?
Well, I think that COVID helped people fully understand that better. I've worked from home for 20 years, and I've had a chronic illness my whole life, which I would hide, right? Because people didn't understand if you weren't well. And now the entire world's like, oh my goodness, is that a cough? You should probably stay home. Yeah. Right. You should probably self-care. And that terminology and that consciousness has definitely grown. And so I like that. I like that we've become more human as well, because everybody's dog barks when the UPS guy comes, or, what's the UPS is there as well, but they're not
we have UPS.
Who's the big delivery agent?
What's the big delivery agent? Hermes is one of them, I think, that sort of trundles up a lot of the time.
There you go. Yep. So
DPS, I think they call themselves now. They seem to be around a bit. Yeah.
There you go. So I think that I think that when you're young in your career, it's about where you're going, right? And then when you're getting mid-career, you realize, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be enjoying this ride. Am I in the right career? Should I be doing this than that? And, we start to try to enjoy the journey a little bit more. And I've entered stage 3 now. And I don't know how many there are, Kevin, to be clear. There's definitely under 5. But in stage 3, I get that it's who I'm with on the ride. That's really what I'm focused more on, is right, the people that you're bringing with you on your journey and the joy that brings and the experiences that you can have.
Well, you've been kind enough to come on my journey today, if you like, over the next 20 minutes. Yeah, that was a smooth link, wasn't it? Don't you think? There you go.
Well done, sir. Well done.
I love bigging myself up. So why don't we talk a little more about salespeople then? Opening question for you straight off the bat, Lauren. Good salespeople, born or made?
God, you can absolutely make them. Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I think that works better. It's more scalable. So there's an art and a science to selling. And I spent a lot of time talking about the transition between sales and sales leadership, Kevin. And the very, very best reps or sellers are born. It's natural. It's an art to them. And the problem is they make horrible leaders. Because it's an art, they cannot teach it. So if you can combine a little art with a little science, and by science, I mean maybe their strengths, the process, the skills, the methodology, all of the stuff we put behind the people, that's when you get magic. That's when you get magic. But I think that when it's too science, let's go further down that spectrum. And by that, I mean, everything's scripted. The process drives everything. There's a strict cadence. There's no room for the human. And I think that's when we've gone too far. And we see that a lot in the US, in the tech sector, the SaaS industry and the rise of the venture capital and the need to have hockey stick growth has over-processed and over-scienced, if you will, the seller, which is why the average tenure is dropping every year in salespeople, right? We're teaching young people to come in and hate sales, and that breaks my heart.
I agree with you. I think there's a reason for that. I think the main reason for that is it's much easier to automate process with tools than it is conversations with people.
100%. 100%. And if you're just looking at the numbers, which is what you do when you're a VC or a PE firm, right? You look at this and say, oh, okay, well, here's my abysmal conversion. I'll just throw this many heads on it. Let's just do the math, right? And that conversion is abysmal because you're not doing the proper onboarding and you're not giving them the skills and we're not giving them the coaching and we're not treating them as humans. They could be replaced by outgoing voicemail messages. And those folks, I think, will be the first to embrace AI and replace the human side of selling. But if you look at it from the customer point of view, HubSpot's study a few years ago showed that trust in salespeople has come down to an all-time low. It's now at 3%, which is just over politicians. So there's a bright spot for you. But there's not.
Don't tempt me. Don't tempt me to get into politics, Lauren.
Right? No, let's not.
Yeah. No, I'd love to, but it's really not the right topic for the podcast. Unfortunately, we'll do that another time. We'll do that. Exactly. We'll do that another time. I would say that actually, that's a very good point that you make. But I think we all know that people buy instinctively with their hearts first, and then rationalize their purchases logically with their heads afterwards, don't they?
I was just talking about this yesterday. It's a Harvard Business Review study. And so when someone makes a decision, it happens in your subconscious brain, and then it's communicated to your conscious brain via an emotion.
Yeah.
So they do buy first on emotion and then justify with logic.
Yeah, I think it's because of the human brain. I mean, we've got a 3-part brain, haven't we? And one of those, the mammalian brain, is very much focused on emotions and making those emotional decisions. And I think if you look at politics at a level, without mentioning names, and whether you like the politicians that we've got or not, many of the most successful ones are the ones that directly appeal to our emotions. Sometimes they're not always the most rational of decisions or the most rational of arguments. They're emotional. I mean, actually, Martin Luther King, you could say, he didn't stand up and say, I have a plan. He said, I have a dream. He was appealing to emotions.
That was very well done. You're so exactly right. I have a 3-part strategy. No, he had a dream and we loved it. You're so right.
It's true, isn't it?
Why TV changed politics too, isn't it?
Absolutely. Completely, every time. Yeah. So we're on the same page, you and I. It's interesting. We seem to have, although this is the first time that we've actually spoken, we seem to have on a joint mission together to find out what it is that makes great salespeople. So you're saying it's a balance of art and science. It's
Yes.
emotional logic combined with, well, it's emotion and logic combined with some degree of skills, do you think? But we can train people to be better sellers.
I mean, it's what I do, right?
Yeah.
I've made a career out of it. And some are harder than others, right? And there are some things that are harder to teach than others. I'll also tell you that I believe sales fully is a confidence sport. So I was working with a group yesterday, and these are young sellers, right? And so they're calling into doctors' offices and saying, well, they're trying to get through a nurse to a doctor, and then they're trying to get a doctor to a call. And I listened to far too many of them use the hesitant language. Well, we have this kind of sort of training, right? And well, if the doctor maybe kind of sort of would, if they might have time possibly on it, right? And so we would stop and we would coach. Like, if you don't believe it, they won't believe it, right? There's a far cry between, well, we have this sort of training to this is a critical training that you have to take. So we have to project that confidence. And we talked a lot about building confidence, which is my favorite thing to speak about. It's sort of a lifeblood, especially in sales, but it's a little too touchy-feely to make it into a typical training, right? Or even discussion. It's hard to even measure for it in hiring.
It's interesting, though, that you're right. Most of the best salespeople that we know, the natural salespeople, have enormous amounts of self-confidence, don't they?
Oh, yeah. And it's that swagger that
Yeah.
makes them so good and
Yeah.
also makes them horrible managers,
Yes.
right? You could probably translate this real time into strengths finders because that's what you do so well, right? But they need constant petting, right? They need all the attention. They're uber competitive, highly confident, engaging, draw people to them, right? It is a me parade. And unfortunately, as leaders, then it has to become a we parade or about the other people. And that makes them just the hardest skill I find to translate, to transfer is coaching for managers, right? Because it's so hard to stop telling what to do and to be impatient for the result and instead ask the questions and coach the person and not the deal.
That management piece, actually, the middle manager between the sales rep and the sales leader is a tough job.
I think it's one of the toughest. In fact, true story. It was that first job I had in sales management around the year 2000 that has informed both the companies that I started 20 years later, right? I was so overwhelmed as a frontline sales manager. And there was no job training for it. And it was so frustrating. And I was the only woman, like for miles. And so it was that pain that's still so fresh in my mind that I thought I can solve for that because I haven't seen any other company do that. So that was the first thing we built before we started doing frontline rep training at Factor 8. We built sales manager job training. And it's so rewarding to watch these folks like, oh, I finally understand my job.
Do you find that that's the kind of area you like to help that person, the sales manager, because you were that person?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I was that person, and I was frustrated because my reps that would come out of training knew everything about the product and nothing about how to sell it.
Yeah.
And I was that person saying, I'm sorry, what do I do? And how do I do it? And the company I worked for, they did their best to invest in manager. They put us through the rep new hire training and then bought us some leadership training because that's what's out there. But nobody's teaching you, what meetings should you have, right? How do you conduct those meetings? How do you do a pipeline review? What's a performance one-on-one, right? And you can always spot a fresh manager, Kevin, because they'll talk about metrics, right? Like get on the phones or, send out more emails or here's your activity. And they'll talk about results. But this land in between is a barren wasteland. They don't understand how to translate this high-level goal into daily or weekly KPIs or leading indicators or other levers. So even just how to work the numbers and how to read the reports And understanding that part was so critical and missing.
I think what you're describing is a land where the manager knows what to do and will tell you what to do, and then will measure your performance against those metrics, but doesn't really understand how to help you to do it.
Well, I think that part is 100% true. And they know what to do as a rep, but maybe not what to do as a manager.
Right.
That's a different land, which is why it's so easy for a manager to jump in and take over calls. And we do what we're comfortable doing. And until somebody is showing them the role model of what the other job is and how you're supposed to do that, that's what you find, right?
Yeah.
Typical, really common complaints from sales leaders when they come find us for manager training.
Is that one of the most common complaints?
It is. Yeah. They don't understand how to coach. Everybody's doing something differently, right? So you get a lot of, listen, we're American cowboys anyway, but that's what we do. Everyone's just running their team in their own way. There's different levels of good and what that means. There's a lot of inconsistency and crap forecasts. Those are your top complaints.
Yeah. Well, I think what I see when I'm working with sales teams is there's a lot of inspection going on, but there's not much coaching. So, a pipeline review would be, let's have a look at these deals. Let's kind of tick them off and see where they are. But we're not really working with the rep to figure out how we can move them forward. It's very much a one-way process.
You're so right. And if you survey them, which folks have, I'll tell you, share with you, I'll share with you these results. They think that's coaching, right? So it's like, hey, hit your number. Great job, man. Check, you've been coached, right? Or, hey, ask them for their budget. Check, you've been coached. So there was a survey done a few years back that said managers thought they were spending, I think it's 4 to 6 hours a month with every rep. This was from the Bridge Group and Exact Vision, U.S. companies in digital selling transformation. And 98% of the reps surveyed disagreed with that number. So that tells me there's a miscommunication on what is coaching, right? So there's, and it makes sense because you can talk about being a great coach as a leadership style, can't you? This is a person that leads by asking questions.
Absolutely.
Right? I'm working with my people. I'm asking good questions. I'm a great coach. But if you were to define skills coaching, which I think is where you and I get frustrated and where we work all day long, the way I define that is that it has to be a small group. There has to be the skill execution present, whether it's a call or a recorded call or something, right? A ride along. And then somebody has to walk away with one-on-one personal feedback on execution. If we're just talking about what you need to get better at in general, still, right? You're not coaching my execution on something. You're just giving me some feedback. So it has to be present. The performance has to be present. I have to walk away with some personal feedback, which means I think coaching can be as many as 3 or 4 people, as long as we're all walking away with personal feedback on how we've done.
Yeah. Well, if it's not personal feedback, it's not coaching, as you say. There's a role for group training, actually, and those sort of top salespeople that you talked about that don't like being in training, they underestimate the impact they can have on the people that are in the room that may want to learn from them. And once you get them to tap into that there are people here that would like to learn from your expertise, that can change the dynamic a little bit. They can see a reason to be there.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, there's always something else that they can learn. So I think the great ones have that growth mindset. The divas who don't, you're right. The only way to get them to participate and be in class is that they can be a star and make them a star in that class. But the great ones get that it's all about the improvement, not just the win.
So what do you think are the characteristics of top performing salespeople? What would you look for if you were going to hire somebody?
Yeah.
Right? What would you look for?
The big C for me is coachability. That's important. That shows some of the growth mindset. And I'll tell you a really interesting way we measure that. I'll come back to that. Curiosity is also critical. So as a salesperson, you have a chance to be a business consultant, right? And to pollinate like a honeybee from one company to another, but only if you're in there learning and you genuinely want to understand what's happening in different businesses. And if you don't have that curiosity, you're not going to ask questions. You're just going to get in there and pitch, no matter how much I train you. So these are the attributes, not the skills, right? And the third C is the confidence. We've got to have some of that. That confidence sales, like we said before, it's a confidence sport. Now, there's all kinds of different, experiences I'd like to see, skills I'd like to see, but those three C's are attributes that you bring to the table as a human being that are more difficult to train and move and influence. So I look for that in hiring.
And I'm guessing that have you written books on selling yourself?
Do you know what? I've never taken the time. I'm featured in quite a few books. I'll contribute a chapter here or there, and it's still on the bucket list, Kevin.
Good.
But I am not. I'm running 2 companies and raising 2 humans right now, and that's my excuse.
That's a lot. That's quite a lot. What are the books that you like? What are the sales books that you would recommend? Is there either a couple?
My friend Carol Mahoney just put out a fantastic coaching book. Lots of great research, and I do not have it in front of me.
Is this a plug? Is this what you're doing here for Carol?
I'm plugging it for her. Yeah, I can't, but I'm failing miserably because I can't remember the title of it, and it's not. Usually, I keep it, right here on this side of my desk. But look up Carol Mahoney. She's got a great book. I love what she does. I also like Jill Conrath's books on selling. It's been a minute, so I think she put out 3, and I think she's done a really, really good job there as well. I don't know. I don't get as excited about the latest and greatest that you see in the airport bookshelves, right? It's just, it's the fancy stuff. It's what sells books, but it doesn't necessarily move conversations forward. I think that in our world, in technology and digital selling, the hardest part is getting to the person. And most books are about the face-to-face conversation with the person. And so it breaks my heart when I see high transactional companies pull in something like a Challenger, right? It's like, your rep is 25 years old. And if you are inviting them to challenge the C-level person you have them calling into, you are inviting them to fail. And by the way, they're going to spend most of their time just trying to get that guy on the phone, teach them those skills, right? We've got to baby steps. We've got to get them on first base. There's a movie that Brad Pitt was in about 10 years ago called Moneyball. It's about American baseball. And this small coach on a small team, the Oakland A's, called Billy Beane. And Billy Beane won the pennant with the smallest budget in baseball. Not because he got the big fancy pitcher and the big closer and, the hype wasn't the airport book. He won because he found very small name players that were inexpensive who could get on first base. Because you can't get home if you can't get on first. And that's kind of where we focus at Factor 8 is getting people on first base. We've got training all the way through the whole sales cycle, but the focus is, how do you get on first base? And that is getting and keeping that decision maker in the call with you. And if we can increase the likelihood of those conversations, they're more likely, right? You got to fill the top of the funnel. They're going to get home. And as a young seller, it's frustrating. You're going to teach me how to have a conversation, but it's going to be a year before I can use that. Teach me how to get the guy on the phone so I can get those fast wins. And that's what's addictive to great salespeople, isn't it? The win and that hunt and that competition. So we have to find ways to help them win sooner or they tap out.
Lauren, we have raced through this conversation. We've only got time for one last question. What's the one thing you wish you knew at the beginning of your career that you picked up along the way?
Kevin, that's such a good question. Thank you for asking that. We talk about this a lot in Girls Club. When I was young, I was criminally underconfident, and I let other people inform me of my smallness and my opinion of myself, and therefore didn't take enough risks, didn't take enough bets on myself, didn't raise my hand often enough, didn't feel like I deserved my place at the table when I did get it. And I just wonder just how much, not just how much further I would be, but honestly, how much happier I would be if I could go back with the wisdom and the confidence I gained in my 40s and imbibe that into the young woman in her teens and 20s, what a different ride it would be. I'm certainly happy with where I've wound up, but that's what I would go back and do. It's been such a pleasure talking to you today. Kevin, I think that we could talk like this for hours. I thank you so much for having me on your show. And it's been so much fun talking about strengths and sales leadership and sellers. I could do it again anytime. Thank you so much.